Stakeholder management is critical to any successful continuous improvement project or any project for that matter. And my guest today is an expert and has shared her experience with me, which I'm going to share with you. Welcome to Mic Drop, Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders. My name is Gary Cox, and my guest today is Yolanda P, as she's known on LinkedIn. It's really interesting what she has to share as it relates to stakeholder management in difficult situations. I know you're going to value what she has to share.
Yeah, I agree. It does take a lot of time in the stakeholder management, and it's such a key important part because at the end of the day, with the most amazing tools that we do have, that we are all human beings. If there's no genuine connection and that communication really valid, like understanding the value, feeling heard, that respect, you can have the best tool, the best digital app. People are not going to do it.
No, you're absolutely right. I use the term currency, and it was really interesting. You were talking about your Denmark and the Angolans, how they're different. You have to have different currency with each of them, right? Taking one and getting to know them, meeting with them, maybe going out for a dinner meeting and talking about things. That was kind of some currency, and then you understood what they valued, and I think that's really important. One, it shows a sign of respect that I'm trying to understand what you value, but it's also a way for you to, you use the term sweeten them up. Currency is really what's going to do it for you, right?
Yeah,
right.
And it's something as simple as which only a year living in Angola, because I lived there for 4 years, I realized. So, and that's because someone actually told me, Yolanda, you are not allowed to do that. And what happened was, because I was raised here in London, I was very used to being very direct. And so if a process is wrong, I would say, okay, so let's discuss this process. I can see there's a leakage. So the way I would talk, it was very much formal and straight to the point. And that worked really well with the side of the Denmark part. And actually my CEO that was from Scotland, that worked fine. On the Angolan side, they saw that as actually being quite rude. So the first thing I should say as soon as I entered the office was not, we have a problem where I found this solution. I think we should use this solution for that. They don't want to know about that yet. The first 3 to 5 minutes is, how was your weekend? How's your family? And it took me a while to realize that until someone put me on side. Yolanda, I know you have the best intentions, but you know that is actually quite rude here. If you come to my office, he literally came up to me, he's like, if you come to my office, you have to ask me, how am I and how's my family? This is not a polite way of conducting business. Completely different. So quickly I had to learn that if, depending on which side who I was talking to, I had to use a different approach. And that was okay. Again, it's respecting the culture, sometimes it's the personality. Someone that is very financial driven, they are not going to care about the fact that people are leaving work because they don't feel safe. They care about the costs, perhaps. I'm just putting something out there, but finance people will care more about actually data, the cost, the impact. Someone in HR will care about, why are we not retaining the employees? Why such a high turnover? So it's understanding really what value is for each person and turn that into the conversation that is meaningful, not only for the person you're talking to, but yourself, and find a common ground.
I read a great book by Erin Meyer. You know Erin Meyer's book, The Culture Map, right?
Yeah.
So that was a really good book. I've mentioned it more than once on my webcasts because I just learned so much from that about these various responses to culture. So let's talk about different cultures' responses to crisis. Right now, for example, the financial markets are in a pretty big crisis mode, but there's different ways of approaching how you manage in that situation. What have you learned about the different cultures as it relates to crisis management?
So I would say that not just cultures, but also with personality types. So sometimes you will see an individual, the personality is that during a crisis, they completely shut down. They don't want it to acknowledge. It takes them time. Others, they react straight away. Firefighting and I see that a lot in the hospitals, for example, where nurses are more reactive. People on the admin side or the corporate side, they take longer to react. In cultures, I would say it's the same thing. So For example, I actually have a very good example when I was working for the APM terminals in Angola. Unfortunately, our system there, sometimes the internet will crash down quite often. What that meant is all my team that were on the billing side were not able to generate the invoices. Therefore, the importers and dispatchers were completely upset about it because they cannot get an invoice, they cannot pay the bank. Therefore, containers stay in the yard an extra day, which could be between $300 to $600 per day. Extra cost. So there's a lot of frustration. Now, it's quite interesting how each person, depending on the culture, you would react. You would see some people will react, well, there's nothing we can do. We just wait. It's out of our control. Yeah. We already responded. While there are other people who find, okay, we don't have the system, but can we create an alternative? So I was very much on creating an alternative to pause. So for example, anyone that had my signature and stamp in that time that we couldn't have the internet running and so on, they will be exempt for 1 day, right? So being pragmatic, but that came later on because I had a lot of people say, well, it is what it is. It's part of life here. Like if electricity goes off, it goes off. What can you do about it? It's not my responsibility. So different people react to crisis in a different way. And sometimes it's about put yourself on the other person's shoes. I always say that. And if you are on the importer's shoes or, on the other side, whatever's happening with finance, the financial market is how would you feel if that happened to you? And what type of solution or alternative could be given to you that could be mutually beneficial to both sides? Because it needs to be a midterm.
I think that's really important that you think of that third alternative. It's not an either or, but there could be another alternative that you need to explore. And I think that's really a great way to bring in some of again, we talk about some of the Lean Six Sigma tools, the brainstorming tools, the ideas of, to your point, you put in a system that said, wait a minute, if they're trusted a supplier and I can give them my signature, then, that can be a third alternative. I think that's really a creative way to use the tools to solve a problem that even if it's what you would call commonplace because of power failures or whatever, you still have that solution to pull on anytime you need it.
And yeah. I think also the most important part of all my learnings there is that whenever that happened, so for me to come into that conclusion, I invited some importers in, I invited some of my staff, and we literally had a brainstorm. Okay, this is the reality. What would the ideal be from both sides? And that's how we came to that conclusion. So it's not just about one way. And most importantly, when the crisis is resolved, actually visited it again and put something else in place. If this happened again, what else could we do it differently?
Yeah. If you're getting value out of this episode of Mic Drop Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders, be sure to like, subscribe, add your comments. I'd love to hear them.
I think that's critical too. Yeah, that kind of post-crisis evaluation is, if this would happen again, what can we do better? I think that's, again, part of that whole PDCA cycle. I think that follow-up needs to be there so that you can, respond faster, better, more efficiently the next time something like that happens. Now, at the hospital, you've obviously got, I say teams of people for different types of emergencies, right? I mean, so triage teams and so on and so forth. Now, when you think of crisis management, do you think of a crisis team that sort of steps into place, or how do you deal with that whole idea?
So there's two aspects to it. So in a smaller sense, it's not a crisis team, but what we would have, especially in ED, when we see that there's a high influx of patients coming in, we'll have someone actually walking around to see who will need that extra help to help within that process, the patient within the patient journey. So there will be a point that we can look at the data, look at the commotion. So the person in charge in ED would say, actually, we need someone, a floater, to help at certain points. So they are not called a crisis team or anything like that, but it's a way to help and mitigate that crisis. Now, when a big crisis happened in a trust, so in about 6-7 years ago, there was a cybersecurity attack. In fact, there's been another one again. And what happens is you bring a selective group of people to work on that. And normally it will be someone within the IT, cybersecurity, will be on the data, finance, some people within the board members, so you have a few, and clinical leads. So you'll be looking at how to contain, how to stop what's happening. What is a strategy on terms of how can we still see the patients? So it creates a full-on committee to respond to that situation. But that normally happens is it's already almost kind of said who is the seniority within each department that's being affected or impacted and can support. And they bring together, and within that first committee, there's a decision who's going to take what role.
Well, if you enjoyed that episode of Mic Drop, Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders with my guest, Yolanda P, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, make sure that you add your comments. Love to hear what you have to say. And don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode where she shares some interesting HRC